You are listening to GMR Radio. And now, the Great Movie Radio Show.
All right, everyone, quiet on the set. Places. We've got a show to make here. Is Chris ready? Yes. Okay, everyone, in 3, 2, 1, and... Coming to you live from sunny Orlando, Florida, it's the Great Movie Radio Show, a movie talk podcast starring Chris Schneider.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Great Movie Radio Show. This is Chris Schneider coming to you from Orlando, Florida. And I have my good friend and trusted ally from the previous episode, Mr. Jesse Techentin.
Hello again, everyone.
So we're going to dive into some other movies that have been important to you, and maybe one or two that haven't.
All are important because even if it's important to see the bad so that you understand what you like for the good.
Yeah, you're really going to give them... No, these are horrible movies. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that's fine.
I'm normally one to say something like that, but I'm like, are you sure you want to say that?
No, not for.
You're going to name it, and then you're going to be like, no, that's bad. But your first film on the list actually is... we're doing the list of 5 films that have inspired your life beyond your favorites, and these are ones that aren't your favorites, but something in them could be, or is, or has inspired you to be just whoever you are. And I know this first one probably gets a lot of hate from a lot of people, but I do love parts of it. And the Phantom Menace, the first prequel Star Wars film, where George Lucas screws the pooch and gives us Jar Jar Binks. If that's your inspirational part of the film, I apologize.
Well, you see, it really inspired my life because I've just had this role model, and his name is Jar Jar. No, Jar Jar is not a part of this.
That's all the time we have today, folks. I was kidding.
That was a short episode.
Yeah. We did say about 45 minutes. We went for 2. That's good. No.
Sure.
So what about Phantom Menace? What inspired you, I suppose?
Phantom Menace is on here because it's multifaceted. First and foremost, growing up in the 90s and everything, Phantom Menace really is what gave me my love for Star Wars when I really sit back and think about it. Mm-hmm. I was 6, I think, when Phantom Menace came out. At that point, I had already seen all of the original trilogy Star Wars films, but I had basically seen all of those, and then immediately Phantom Menace came out, and you're slightly older than me, so you probably have an even better memory of this than I do. I remember when that film came out, the toys and everything were everywhere. Like you couldn't go, like, even like KFC and like
Taco Bell, KFC, and pizza were all owned by the same conglomerate. So they had, I remember the cup toppers.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like
there was
everywhere, and now all of that stuff is in like antique shops and stuff. Like you'll be like, look at this super nice grandfather clock and Sebulba. Okay,
and Sebulba.
Yeah, exactly. But because of that, like whenever I would like go over to a friend's house and we'd be like, oh, let's play Star Wars or whatever, we'd play Phantom Menace. Like it was typically the characters from that, because that was what was hip and what was new and what we had so many toys on hand from and stuff.
And they came with the clip little things that you would put on the fake razor piece. That's what that little communicator was. It was from like a Venus razor or something that they modeled to look like a communicator.
I forgot about those.
Yeah,
I think we actually probably have a couple of those in our basement right now.
The razors or the toy? Both.
Yes, probably yes.
So yeah, it was like a little chip that would sit on the communicator, and it would be like the toys could talk.
Yes. Yeah, no. I know exactly what you're talking about, but you had to have that communicator.
You did.
I don't think we did, but one of our good friends growing up did. So we'd have to go over to their house to test them out or whatever. Bring your fake razor over, and it could play the toy noises. Yeah. So, like, and again, when you're 6 years old, you don't have that much discernment. I thought that was the coolest movie ever,
well, of course,
growing up, and so that to me gave me the love and the excitement for, honestly, all of the prequels, which to this day, I admit not all the prequels are fantastic films, but it's still Star Wars, and I'm a big enough Star Wars fan that I still love and can find elements of all of them that I can love or whatever, and that add to my love overall of Star Wars.
Amen.
And this brings me to facet number 2, which I truly believe that the music in the prequels may be the best Star Wars music of all of them. That is, I know, a controversial statement. To me, I think that some of the themes that John Williams made and some of just the overall banter and the emotion that you get in the music, because Phantom Menace is the first time I think I can remember as a child seeing and actually consciously realizing the power of what just music and visuals can do. And I remember this specifically for the Duel of Fates.
Duel of Fates, yeah.
And then with that, I have the acute memory of seeing the first time when you have our favorite character, Jar Jar, leading the Gungans again in the big battle against all the battle droids.
That was...
And getting the music cue of when all the droids suddenly start unfolding and rising. You have the bum, 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 bum,
Oh, man, the marching,
like,
yeah.
You have the battle droid march, which is probably not as good as... It's not as good as Imperial March.
Oh, no.
I'll give you that. But the emotion that I remember feeling as a kid was like the kid equivalent of like, oh shoot, like here they come, like
Yeah.
are they gonna do this? And so that kind of has, and that's been something of that I say often is just having visuals and music to drive a story is one of the most powerful storytelling devices I think that you can have, and that's where you know that you have something to tell if you can get it across with just that. Not that you need just that to tell a story. But
no, but it enhances.
When you have that, yes, the power of music to a story brings so much about. And I think I had a third point, but I think that's my main reasons why Phantom Menace is on the list.
No, I understand.
Phantom Menace also, I think this was the third point, was Phantom Menace honestly is kind of a bad film, or is not great overall, but it kind of taught me that, again, there's something good that you can take out of anything. And Phantom Menace, I love, like you said, I love parts of it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
to this day, like things like Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan is
My favorite.
fantastic.
So great.
The music for me from that, honestly, Darth Maul as a villain is one of the best Sith Lords to me. I thought that he's more compelling than Count Dooku.
I'm so glad that they were able to continue his story in the Clone
Yes.
Wars cartoons, because him only having like 5 minutes of screen time was the
And
biggest
2
waste of
lines?
anybody. Yeah, when I saw it, I was 14. You said you were 6. And it's got to be so different through the eyes of a 6-year-old, especially one who had just seen Star Wars. I remember I'd seen the movies before, probably around when I was 6. And then in 97, the special editions came out. So those hit the theater. My dad, of course, took me to all of them, because we're all nerds. Oh, well. And loved them, even though they added some stupid bits that now I look back and I was like, I prefer the old one this way. But I was a kid then, and I was like, I don't care, it's Star Wars, woo! And, I mean, as a 6-year-old, again, you're just worried about, oh, there's space things and aliens and droids to fight and lightsabers, and I don't care about this. That's what it's for. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, they've always said Star Wars is for kids. But even as an adult, I appreciate the imagination that goes into these movies. And even though sometimes it's not the best storytelling or the best dialogue, I mean, the story's not bad.
You get some good world building, though, as well.
You do, but it has been hit or miss with the series. And overall, I've really enjoyed every movie in some sort of fashion. I've never hated anything Star Wars. And I don't think I ever will, but there's definitely a few things like, I get done without that.
That's everything in life, though, honestly.
Yeah. I'm just saying out there for the people like, oh, Rise of Skywalker sucks. Last Jedi is horrible, blah. There are some great things in those movies. Hush.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. And, I mean, when I was saying earlier that your movie dislikes don't deserve love, I was of course kidding, because here I am talking about a movie that people hates, and I mean, I don't necessarily love all of them, but I don't necessarily hate them either. So the next movie on your list is The Wind Rises. I believe that's another Ghibli film.
That is
right?
another. That was Hayao Miyazaki's last film.
I did not get to see that one.
So that I won't say that most people haven't, but that's not one of the more common Studio Ghibli films that you see, or that like things like Kiki's Delivery Service, My Neighbor Totoro, all those immediately come to mind. This was his last film. This is a more reserved one. It is based off of the life of real life true story airplane engineer Jiro Horikoshi, who made the planes that eventually ended up being used by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
But it's I'll say it's Miyazaki's take on his life, and kind of showing him from a boy who just dreams of being able to fly to realizing that his eyesight is too bad, but he can build airplanes, so he goes and studies to be an engineer, ends up falling in love. It's very much it's kind of a slice of life piece almost, and people, and it makes some political statements about that, because he, in the end of the film, spoiler or whatever, does kind of say that he's very upset that his planes are ended up being used for war. That he just wanted to build beautiful dreams, basically. And he still got to do it, and he still lived a good life, although the life of his wife and his time with his wife is also cut short because she died early of tuberculosis.
No.
These are all the spoilers of the film. It doesn't matter. It still is a good film overall. But the reason why this is on my list is because the character of Jiro and the real life person of Jiro, but the way that Miyazaki portrays him, I have never seen myself in a character more, from the way that he thinks about design and dreams and visualizes things, to the way that he just interacts with people and stuff. Like, to me, I see myself in the way that I approach theme park design in the exact same way. And the sweet interactions that he has with his wife and stuff, I see my beautiful wife Ellie in that as well. So it's a film that, kind of because of that, will always be near and dear to my heart. And I think I've seen it both ways, with the Japanese subtitles as well as the English dub. In the English dub, it's what's his name? Joseph Gordon-Levitt is the voice of Jiro Horikoshi. His mentor in his dreams, Caproni, who's the Italian airplane, he's a famous Italian airplane designer who's kind of his inspiration to originally go down there, is voiced by Stanley Tucci.
Nice.
Martin Short is in it. It's got a bunch of very famous actors in it. So, and I know a lot of people with the Studio Ghibli films were like, oh, you only can watch the sub version, like the other ones don't exist. Enjoy it how you want. I think that the majority of their English dubs are wonderful, and I think that Wind Rises is no exception to that rule.
Yeah, I remember when it released, I was interested in seeing it. I never got a chance to. And it came out in 2013, so it's been quite a second.
And I don't think it got released in the U.S. until possibly a year or two after that.
That makes sense.
Because I remember, and that also did not get commercially released in every theater. I remember when that came out, my wife was in grad school in Arizona at the time, and I went out to visit her. And we randomly learned that it happened to be playing at a theater in Tucson. And we were like, oh my gosh, we're going. And it was a magical, wonderful, and touching experience for me.
Well, there's quite a few good names on this list. Mandy Patinkin, Werner Herzog did a voice. William H. Macy. And, of course, the husband-wife duo of Emily Blunt and John Krasinski.
Emily Blunt and John Krasinski. I forgot about that.
Oh, man.
I was going to say Emily Blunt plays Jiro's wife. John Krasinski plays his best friend, who's another engineer.
I might have to check this out. And it's
I'll let you borrow it if you want. I have the DVD of it, or the Blu-ray, I think.
I would totally be interested. However, the next one I own, so don't even, you have no need. I think I own 2 copies of it. Blade Runner 2049.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. We talked Blade Runner earlier, now 2049. Getting back onto that. I love that movie so much. I
thoroughly enjoyed it as well.
Just the production design. The fact that, I think we mentioned this last episode, the fact that the sequel could be viewed on its own and be a standalone movie on its own right. It's such a great story, and Ryan Gosling is one of my favorite actors. And contemporary,
yes. And I think that in the film as well, I feel like Ryan Gosling, in a lot of films, you're kind of like, oh, you're Ryan Gosling, but but you're playing a role. I feel like he's very different from how he normally acts in this, which makes sense because he's an android. But you kind of stole my thunder on that, but the reason why this is on my list is because I think that I'm going to say this on record, and I'm probably going to regret this when I hear this later, but I think that of every film that I have seen in my life, that has the best production design and of any film I have seen, between the sets, the music, the lighting, the film lighting
It's
in
phenomenal.
certain. What is it? The building that is like the main corporation.
Oh, the Wallace Corporation.
Yes, the Wallace Corporation
Yeah.
building. The way that they light that center pyramid room, where it's completely dark on the edges, but you've got like the
light
gold
trickling
wave
through.
light like trickling
Yep.
through. Oh my gosh! Like,
Well, you know,
I feel like I spent the majority of my first viewing of that in the theater with my mouth open. But to me, that is literally just the masterclass of production design, lighting, sound mixing, as well as soundtrack design and visual effects all together. Like, it's the perfect synthesis of all of them to make a world that I already love, but building upon it as well and making it its own thing, and just telling the perfect next step story as well for Blade Runner. To me, I had next to no complaints about the film as a whole, which the way I'm talking about this, you'd be like, well, why isn't this on your favorites list? To me, what again stands out so much is the design of it.
Yeah, and the cinematography was a big part of that movie too, which the great Roger Deakins won his first Oscar for, and then won last night. Which we're recording this way in advance, so the Oscars were last night. Roger Deakins won for 1917 cinematography. Yes. He is a visionary of no comparison as far as being someone behind the camera and designing the shots and designing how everything will flow for the film. And him and Denis Villeneuve are a team made in heaven, and I can't wait to see if I don't know if Deakins is working with Villeneuve on the Dune reboot, but I would be very happy to hear he is, especially with everybody involved with that movie, because that's going to be a seriously great science fiction movie.
That would be fun.
I'm very excited for it, especially because Hans Zimmer is going to do the music. And then the cinematography is actually Greg Fraser. I don't know him, but I'm sure they're going to deliver something great for us. Blade Runner 2049. Oh man, did you see the shorts that they did in between? Because so many years happened between the original and the new one. They made it 30 years later, so it's first one's 2019, the second one's 2049. So in the 30-year gap, there's 3 shorts. One was the Blackout, which they referenced in the film. And it was an anime. I forgot who directed it.
I can't remember if I've watched these or not. I don't think I actually have.
It's on the Blu-ray, so if you own it, I highly recommend watching it. But it's like a 10-minute anime about the Blackout and the replicants resisting. And then there's the second one, which is Wallace, who Neander Wallace is played by Jared Leto in the film. He's very much a Tyrell type, which was the company in the first one, who after the Blackout, they lost everything. Tyrell, of course, died in the first one. Spoiler. And the company went under after the replicants rose up. So Wallace is pretty much saying, hey, I have a way to produce replicants because they've been completely banned now. Like, don't even make them anymore. I have a way to make them and be controlled by us. And he's coming into this meeting and his crazy stuff. And it was only like a 3 or 4 minute short. And then the third one was Sapper Morton, which was Dave Bautista's character at the beginning of 2049. And it's just him in an alleyway doing some sales transactions because he's a protein farmer and he's trying to make money for whatever. And he gets caught up in a fight over someone he knows in the alley and ends up dropping some things, and those papers or whatever he drops gives his identification, I believe, and it allows someone, I guess, I don't know if he's LAPD or if he's a Blade Runner or if there's someone just kind of like a watchdog, picks up on it and gives that information or tells the information over the phone to somebody, and then literally the movie takes place maybe a year later or 6 months later, so they've been looking for him since that.
Yeah.
So it's bridging the gap from the original and events that have taken place that have taken us to 2049.
2K confronting him in the first
and then,
5 minutes or whatever
and
of the
then,
film.
yeah, because if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have found the remains on the ground, and that wouldn't tie to the original. And it's so good how they just tied everything together. The storytelling is phenomenal.
I will need to check that out. I don't think I have seen them.
I highly recommend.
I do own the film though.
Yeah.
I don't know if I own the Blu-ray though, or if it's the DVD.
Well,
I'm not sure.
if you don't have them, they're on YouTube.
Okay.
So you can always watch them on YouTube.
No excuse.
Exactly. No excuse. Your fourth one is My Neighbor Totoro.
Yes, and it was so hard for me to not literally make every film on this list besides horror films be Studio Ghibli films. No, My Neighbor Totoro is on here because it's such a beautiful and wonderful film. And have you seen this one or not?
I have.
Okay.
It's only once, but I've seen it.
I was gonna say it's so cute and it's so charming, and to me, this film belongs on here because this showed me and has been an inspiration to me that, as weird as this sounds, you don't need a story to make a film endearing and timeless and classic. Because really, Totoro, when you examine it, doesn't have a story, doesn't really have a conflict at all. Like it does in the final 20 minutes of the film, where they think that poor little May gets lost and possibly drowned. She didn't. And that's literally kind of the only action. Otherwise, the entirety of the film are the two girls literally just exploring their new rural country home and living their lives as children and seeing, just kind of experiencing the joy of what it is to be children. And then along the way, they encounter the mythical creature of Totoro and his forest friends, and he kind of enhances and blesses their lives there and provides extra fun and stuff. So when you really step back and look at it, it doesn't have a plot. And it doesn't matter because it still has all of the Miyazaki charm, and he puts so many little human touches, half of which are from his life. And there's one. This is a minor little thing, but the opening scene of that film where they first move into the house, their dad tells the two girls to let's play a game. Let's see who can find the stairs to the attic because we need to clean stuff out of the attic. And so they run through the house, testing all the doors, and why can't I think of the older sister's name? The older sister goes first and does it, and then May, the younger child, runs up after and mimics her sister the exact same way, and Miyazaki's like, that was straight from my childhood, we did that, and I tried to mimic everything that my older brother did exactly how he did. And that's such a minor little thing, but it actually makes a big difference in how you overall see and perceive the film, at least as me. So from Totoro, I kind of take out that as much as I'm in a business that is all about story and storytelling and stuff, you don't need the most incredible plot or conflict or epic story to tell a story that is truly touching and happy and enjoyable and loved by audiences.
Oh, yeah.
It's that human connection and the kind of that childlike energy that, to me, connects us to so many things.
It's been a long time since I've seen it. I guess I was saying in one episode, my high school art class, we watched a lot of the Ghibli films. I want to say Totoro was one of them. If not, it's something that we studied a little bit and maybe watched clips of. I remember seeing 2 or 3 of them, and I want to say that was one of them. But I remember it being this just lovely film. And
it's very short as well. I think it's literally 70 or 80 minutes.
I think it isn't the shortest one they've done, because we were talking earlier where there was a one that was 2 hours.
Princess Mononoke, I think, is the longest. That one I think is 2.5, and is sorry, this is a slight sidebar, but I remember, I think it was over 144,000 individual cell frames.
Wow. Of
which Miyazaki himself inspected every single one and redrew more than 2/3 of them, or parts of 2/3 of those cells.
That's just
so it true like Miyazaki, and that kind of stands to Miyazaki as a creator of like truly his hand is in everything in his films, quite literally in most cases.
Yeah, Totoro is an hour and 26 minutes. So
Yeah.
that comment I made about his movies being longer than I was. It's been a minute. So,
but things like The Wind Rises and Princess Mononoke and others are. So you're right both ways. Don't worry.
Okay, that's fine. And then your last one on this list is Repo, the Genetic Opera.
Taking a 720-degree turn from My Neighbor Totoro and running to the other side of the planet. Yeah. No, Repo, the Genetic Opera is on here. It's not a good film. I openly admit it, and that's not a problem. It's very much a cult classic film. This one is another one that's on my list because of how wonderful and amazing the production design is, and just how much of a twist and a blend of everything this is. For people who don't know, Repo the Genetic Opera is set in the year 2057, I believe, in a dystopian world where organ failure has devastated the planet as an epidemic, but there's a biotech company named GeneCo that can physically grow genetic organs basically to replacements for humans so they can continue to live. However, the process is so expensive that most humans need to go on a payment plan to pay for their new heart or whatever. And for those who don't make enough money and default on their payments, GeneCo sends out the Repo Man, who physically repossesses your organs with a scalpel and no anesthetic. And this is a musical. Doesn't that sound happy-go-lucky?
I'm so happy right now.
No, well, and I mean, so you can see that it's a big, happy uplifter, but it's such a blend of genres because the design physically, it's a dystopian sci-fi future like Blade Runner, but it also has Victorian Gothic style costumes and punk rock type costumes, and the music is also everything from classic opera to metal. And so it's a beautiful blend of so much, and it was made on such a little budget by creative-minded individuals who had the vision for whether society truly enjoys it or not. They had a vision for something that they enjoyed, and they did a very good job with it. And to me, this is on my list because it kind of gives over and gives me some guilty pleasure to my darker nature, because I am a very happy, positive, kind of almost like Disney-centric person.
You are, at least the extent that I've known you.
But on the side, I was going to say, I listen to metal music and stuff like that at work all the time, and I do appreciate like the dark goth aesthetic, and so I think that as a teenager when this film came out, it kind of let me indulge that side of myself a little bit.
Your inner goth came out, didn't it?
Yeah, I would never dress like that, but it let me appreciate that, and I was also huge into musical theater, so it kind of struck me in a point of that where I'm like, oh, this is simultaneously like the cool dark side stuff and musical theater, and again, it's not a great story, and it's not even a great movie overall, but between the design and just kind of the outright absurdity of it and letting me enjoy my little bit of metal or whatever on the side, it earns its way onto this list.
There you go. Oh, that's one that I've overlooked so many times that I've never sat down and watched it, and I probably just need to knock it out just to say I've seen it.
I've unfortunately I've never made anybody watch it, but I've been like, hey, you should watch this, and it tends to be a you love it or you hate it film.
Yeah.
My wife hates it. And I don't think she ever will like it, and that's fine. Most of my friends have actually been like, no, I get it. Like, and I do like it. So I feel like there's something typically that you can appreciate at least one bit.
Yeah.
Sarah Brightman, I just realized, is in that, who is the original Christine for Phantom of the Opera on Broadway.
Oh.
And was Andrew Lloyd Webber's wife for a period of time.
Yeah.
And she plays a classic opera singer.
I didn't know that.
So even just musical theater people can enjoy it.
And I was talking to you about this earlier, that I'd seen the adaptation that was more science fiction, less opera, with Jude Law, called Repo Man, which was...
But if there's no opera, what's the point?
I do like opera. It was okay, and I say that with a question mark.
No, I remember when that came out after Repo did.
Yeah.
But that was based off of a book that I think was technically written before both.
Yeah, it was the Repo Mamba or something like that, and I'm assuming it was the bigger studio saying, we like that movie, we can do something different than the opera and more action oriented, and so Jude Law and Forrest Whitaker, and they did, and it was okay. But I do know that the opera itself is more of a cult classic.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I was going to say Repo the Genetic Opera. The director was Darren Lynn Bousman, who did Saw 2 through 4, I think.
Really?
So he was known for he didn't do the original Saw film, but he did the Saw, or a bunch of the consecutive Saw films after that. And I was going to say the two creators, Terrence Adunich and Darren Smith, who were the writer and creators of the original 10-minute rock opera that they wrote that became this film.
Yeah.
Darren Lynn Bousman got his hands on it, and because he was well known enough and had made enough money doing Saw, basically was comfortable pitching directly to Lionsgate, like, hey, this is the film that I want to make. And I think they even shot on the Saw set like test footage of what eventually became Repo, and they gave him a tiny budget and greenlit it. But kind of unfortunately now, because that same group basically has made other movies since then. They've made it's either 2 or 3 films that are musicals called The Devil's Carnival. That's a trilogy. Those they completely control. Unfortunately, Repo's controlled by Lionsgate, so they can't make, because it's got a big enough cult following that people want a sequel, and they can't do it now because unfortunately that IP has basically been sold to Lionsgate, and Lionsgate's cool with controlling it, but doesn't want to invest money into making anything else because it wasn't a financial success.
Yeah, I understand. I had friends who liked it when it came out, and again, I just never got around to watching it, and I probably should just sit down and watch it.
That's another one I can let you borrow if you want. Although I think that you could also probably find it online.
It's probably on Netflix or something. Who knows?
It was for a while. I don't know if it is anymore.
Who knows?
Yeehaw! Well, look here. We sure do hope you're enjoying this episode of the Great Movie Radio Show, starring my old partner, Chris Schneider. Don't none of you hombres move always on this break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Warning. Remain on this podcast. The advertisement you are experiencing is extremely dangerous. Proceed with caution.
Hey everyone, it's Chris from the GMR Show. I just wanted to let you know about a new feature we're adding to our website. You can go to anchor.fm/GMR-show/message. That's a lot of slashing. Sorry about that. And you can go to the site and leave us a 1-minute voicemail. And what that allows us to do is, if you want to give us a movie recommendation or perhaps some feedback on the show or just say hello, we can actually put you in one of our episodes. So check that out. And there's an easier way to probably do it. Go to our website, thegmrshow.com. Go to the Contact Us page, and there's a link right there for you. So you don't have to type all that crazy mumbo jumbo I just said. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for listening to the Great Movie Radio Show. And now, we are proud to present a GMR Show original silly trailer.
This summer, get ready for a new action duo.
Look out for Gabe and Chris's singing duo podcast coming to nowhere near you.
One likes to say the word exactly way too much.
Exactly.
The other likes to reference Jim Carrey and annoy his mama.
Did you ever get your beat?
Oh, that's a spicy meatball. Everyone on the same key.
Together, they have one mission.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Great Movie Radio Show.
Chris Schneider.
Never leave this place. Get me out of here.
Gabe Jaramillo.
He said it right.
Get ready for the co-host.
Woo! You've been listening to the Great Movie Radio Show starring Chris Schneider, which means you hit the mother load. Don't forget to stake your claim by hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss another great episode of this Movie Talk podcast. See you on the trail.
We are going to talk about top 5 film scores and or composers. You've got a great list here. I know 3 of them, of course: John Williams, John Powell, and James Newton Howard. I don't know Joe Hisaishi. I was like trying to make sure I don't say that right. And then Tuomas.
I myself am probably gonna butcher this, which is a Tuomas Holopainen,
Okay.
I believe, who's Finnish. First of all, I do want to point out that on this list of 5 people, 4 of their names begin with J, and that's kind of a joke that I have is, if it's a composer and their names begins with J, they're probably a good composer.
Fair enough.
Not quite, but Hans Zimmer is an exception.
I was going to say, I love Johan Johansson, who recently passed away. I'm still sad about that. But he was a great composer, and name starts with J, so there you go.
Yeah. I was going to say John Williams. I think just about everyone who's been on this show has put John Williams as their number 1 or has been in there. Not everyone.
A score by John Williams has been involved with the list, but
With every
might not
single
just
one.
necessarily have just named John Williams. Or James Horner as well. There's another J for you.
I was going to say John Williams, I mean, at this point, kind of what else is there to say? He's simply the man. He's simply I feel like the best film composer that's out there and living, and God forbid the day that he passes, he will probably still be continued to be known as the best film composer for many, many years after that.
I agree, because there's no one who could take that from John Williams. I'm sorry. Joe
Hisaishi.
Hisaishi. I don't know his work.
Basically, name a Studio Ghibli film, and he composed it.
Got it.
So I was gonna say, I feel like John Williams does a lot of like fanfare, like big epic things. Joe Hisaishi stuff tends to be piano based, or tends to the main instrument that you hear from everything else be piano based. Not all of them are. Partially because of how near and dear to my heart the Studio Ghibli films are. He goes on this list. My favorite score of his is actually Princess Mononoke, which actually, despite what I just said, of most of his scores are piano based. Princess Mononoke is not. It's string instrument based. But that's another one that simply the music with Miyazaki's visuals really tell the emotion of that story.
Yeah.
And I managed to sneak 2 pieces of his music instrumentally into our wedding when my wife and I got married.
Nice.
She came down the aisle to Ashitaka and Song, which is the like kind of closing psalm from Princess Mononoke. So that will always hold a very near and dear piece to my heart.
That's awesome.
That he's just phenomenal, and behind John Williams, he's my second favorite composer, and is someone who I will probably never have the opportunity to hear perform live, because he rarely does things outside of Japan, but he's simply phenomenal.
You never know. He might.
He just did a concert in LA, I want to say last year, and a couple of my friends got to go, and I kind of died.
Oh no.
Because if I had known, I didn't have the money to go out to California for something like that, but I would have considered it.
It's definitely one of those. I was the same. Hans Zimmer came through recently, and
Didn't he come
went
to Atlanta? Yeah.
And I wanted to go, and I almost did, and I had friends who did, but I didn't get to go. John Powell's your third, and I know he's done scores such as How to Train Your Dragon, and
he's kind of the DreamWorks composer.
Yeah, he recently just did the solo Star Wars film for Ron Howard as well. So he's done quite a few things. I'm assuming your love for How to Train Your Dragon, and I'm assuming you love more of the DreamWorks movies that you that's probably what ties you together.
The scores for How to Train Your Dragon, and the score, he also did the Kung Fu Panda films, which Kung Fu Panda also holds a near and dear space to my heart. Ironically, the second film of Kung Fu Panda is my favorite, which I feel like rarely the second film of a trilogy is the favorite. But it really opens up the world and brings it into a darker and more dangerous and human realm, the second film.
I did like the second one, I think, a little more than the first one. I never saw the third one.
The third one goes back to being more comedy based. I feel like even more so than the first one. Also, Gary Oldman plays such a good villain. And who doesn't want to hear Gary Oldman be a peacock? So, yeah. No, but of John Powell, How to Train Your Dragon, the score for that is so wonderful, and the Celtic and Nordic notes that he brings into it to bring Burke to life is so much fun.
Oh, I need to go back and watch the How to Train Your Dragon movies. I've only seen the first one.
First, to me, is by far the best, and the test flight scene from the first one, which is also the most iconic music from that. Just the music from that kind of almost brings me to tears every time. Like, even now when I watch that scene.
I really loved the first one, and I'm kind of upset with myself that I held off on seeing the second one for so long. And I remember looking at when the third one was coming out, because I work at a theater, and I was like, how like rating wise is it doing to the others? And they're like mid to upper 90s, all three of them, and that's incredible for that scope of film, because you don't see a lot of animated pictures that come out and hold the same esteem that the previous one has. You'll have the first one that's great, the second one will be okay, third one will be all right, now you're just milking it, and then the fourth one you're like, okay, I'm lactose intolerant, stop milking it. So it's bad, but these have had such consistent quality to them.
Yes,
that's what sets them apart, I think, from a lot of current
to me that and
Western animation films.
Yes, and I think that DreamWorks really hit a very solid and very just well crafted in general franchise with dragons, as well as with Kung Fu Panda. And one can argue Shrek. I won't argue that hard for Shrek. The first one was groundbreaking for when it did. John Powell also did Shrek.
Oh yeah, that's right. And
at least the first one.
The second one was okay. I liked the second one. It was the third one I never saw, but I heard it was and I think they did like 70 more, and I was like, how is he?
I saw the first two as well.
Yeah, but that's all you need for that guy.
Yeah. And
in the morning, I'm making waffles.
Indeed.
The directors on your list are wonderful. Of course, Miyazaki being the first one, because if anyone knows that you love Ghibli movies by now,
yes,
they just haven't been
listening.
And
I've kind of said so much already about Miyazaki's style that if we need to skip over him, we can.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about him for a second. Ridley Scott, of course, you love Blade Runner, Alien. Tarantino, he's my favorite, so I love talking about him. Spielberg, he's, like you said, John Williams. No one will ever outdo him. I don't think anyone can ever outdo Spielberg as a director. And then I do not know your fifth one,
Makoto Shinkai. It's the same with last episode you mentioned. Yeah, there's this film, Your Name, and your dramas list that I haven't heard of that. He is another. He's a manga writer and artist, as well as a director. He's being called now, and he says no to this, that it is an overstatement. But people are calling him the next Miyazaki of this generation. All of his films, he's made several that are very... Your Name has now surpassed Spirited Away as being the top grossing animated film in Japan. And I want to say... I don't know if it's worldwide, but it surpassed Spirited Away, I know, in Japan for that. His other films, Garden of Words, 5 centimeters a second, all of them tend to be slice-of-life stories that are not always everyone's cup of tea, 'cause they're not always that exciting, but... where Miyazaki mixes humans with fantasy and fantastical stuff, Shinkai tends to... He does do some fantasy stuff, but it's mostly intense focus on humans and human nature and human relationships. And I'll use Your Name as an example. Your Name is... I recommend it to anyone, is a story of two Japanese teenagers, one who lives in a rural town and one who lives in, I think, Tokyo or a giant city. And they end up having dreams where when they dream, they become each other. And they actually, but it's not just a dream, it's they actually are controlling the other person for that day in their life. And so they begin realizing that this is happening and leaving like notes on each other's phones to be like, hey, I did this today and stuff. And even though they have never physically met, they just become each other. They kind of form a friendship and start falling in love almost slightly, and then randomly, and so you're like, oh, this is where the film is going, and then in the middle they're just like, it stops. And so then the boy who lives in Tokyo is like, what happened? And so then the rest of the film is him trying to figure out who she is, what happened, why did this suddenly stop. And I don't actually want to give away
don't tell me
what is going on, but it's a wonderful slice of life, human nature, love story. The music is fantastic. Also, I was going to say, you've seen Studio Ghibli films. Studio Ghibli is all hand-done cell animation, and is gorgeous, but is also, I'll say, the cells, they look like anime. They look kind of cartoony and stuff. For Shinkai, the cells and the characters look very similar to anime design, but all the backgrounds are hyper real. And so it adds this like gorgeous visual aesthetic to it that sets him very apart and is kind of like known as Shinkai's style.
Got it.
So he's phenomenal. He just released I don't know if it came to your theater. He just released a film.
Weathering for You. We're playing it. We played 2 Fathom event shows, and then they kept it on as a full booking. It did so well.
That's one that I didn't have the time, but I really wanted to. And he is one of those. I know that you've said, I think in a previous episode, that Tarantino is one of those where like, oh, he releases a film, I'll buy a ticket and see it. Shinkai for me is someone who's similar to that when time allows, because I didn't get to do the Fathom event, but I try to make it a point to see almost all of his.
I don't know if we're gonna still have it this week, but
no, it's fine.
Okay,
I'll see it when it comes out.
Yeah, whatever.
When I can stream it.
There you go. Well, and Ridley Scott, wonderful director. He's done Gladiator and Robin Hood, and he's revisited the Alien franchise, which some people didn't like, Prometheus or Covenant. I enjoyed them both.
I enjoyed them both. I enjoyed Covenant more than Prometheus.
Okay.
I think that Prometheus, I was simply happy to re-enter the world of Alien again.
I think that's why I enjoyed them as much as I did. Because I was just happy to be back, and it was better than Alien 3 and 4.
Most things are.
Exactly.
I actually don't think I've seen Resurrection. I've seen the third. I've seen the first 3.
Yeah. I want to say I've seen 1 and 2. Enough of 3 to say I've watched the whole film, but maybe not like the entire thing. And then the 4th one, I think I watched maybe a little bit and was like, meh. But I
haven't seen either of the Alien versus Predator.
Oh yeah, I haven't either.
Those were a different type of film.
Dave Fesky swears that even though they're so bad, that if you watch them in the tonality that they're a detective story from the point of view of either, I can't remember if he said it as the Alien or the Predator. I'm assuming the Predator just because of the character style.
Yes.
That it's a detective story. That it adds to the cheese factor in a good way. So
I could. Knowing what I know about them, I could see that would be entertaining.
Yeah. At least add a little bit of to the movie. But again, I've never watched those either, just because they just seem like those Freddy versus Jason popcorn. We're putting 2 franchises together that everyone loves to sell a ticket. It's all it is to me. That's why I've never partaken. We're going to talk a couple more bits before we get out of here, and one of them is 5 films you haven't seen, and I have seen 4 of them. The 5th one is Weathering for You, which I have not seen, but I know you loving Shinaki. Did I say that? Shinkai. I thought there was an extra I in there.
Oh, you're good.
Shinkai, as much as you do, that one's definitely going to be seen soon. Missing Link, we've established that you and I both love Laika.
Laika's fantastic.
Missing Link, I'm surprised didn't win the Oscar for
there's some scene in that I remember I saw so many articles about people like blowing all animators' minds because of how many different stop motion components and visual effects and stuff were going into this one, like, I don't want to say simple sequence, but it was I think it was something with an iceberg.
Yeah.
Or I think it was one of the ice sequences where Bigfoot and Hugh Jackman are in the ice area. That's about as much as I know about this.
It's
that Hugh Jackman's in it and Bigfoot's in it.
I remember enough to know what you're talking about, but I also don't want to give it away because it's a great film. It did win a Golden Globe, very well deserved. Another movie on your list, Toy Story 4, actually took the Oscar.
I feel like Pixar almost always does.
It does, but there's been 4 Toy Stories, and this is the first and original story of Missing Link. I love Toy Story. Toy Story 4 was great. See it, please. Hilarious.
I've heard that it's very funny. I've heard especially Forky is great.
Forky is great, and then I love Key and Peele's plush characters because they just crack me up.
And no spoilers / I really truly think that I know what the spoiler is.
Yeah.
But I've had friends say the final 15 minutes of the film completely spoil or completely ruin everything else that the first 3 Toy Story films do. And from people saying that, I'm like, I know what happens. And I think that I voiced I think this is what happened, and my friend was like, yeah. But that I don't think is going to ruin the experience for me. But I'm also just kind of curious to see
how it plays out,
and what the catalyst is that gets this certain character to the point where this event happens.
Well, the way it starts out, it's almost like he's already there to begin with. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
And then the progression of the film and to the end.
Okay.
And because you watch the entire film and then you look back and you're like, it's the idea of this has been there from the get-go of this movie. And
then I guess the and this is a slight spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen the film. I say this, I haven't seen the film. It's then the opposite kind of Toy Story 3. The whole thing is Woody is Andy's toy.
Yeah.
What do you need to put Woody through to make him not Andy's toy, and realize that really his family are these toys right here,
exactly,
not Andy, and they need to put him in a freaking inferno and make everybody cry in order to get to that point.
Don't remind me on the theater, and oh my god, I was bawling.
No. So it doesn't play out.
No,
with the unfortunate grace that I would like that to be unified at the end. But
it was an interesting turn, and it wasn't necessary. But after seeing it, people grow up, people change, and I think since we're continuing a story, we're going with the progression of the story. Things change, things grow, things move on. That's all I'll say.
I'm very impressed that we had a full conversation about that with basically no spoilers and the fact that I haven't seen it.
Yeah. So, no, there you go. There's Toy Story 4 in a nutshell. Spoiler-free review and not giving anything away except it is a he character. So, the other 2 on your list, one is 1980. Yes. And the other one came out last year, and it's the sequel.
But you could do it as a double feature. And honestly, I would
double feature it. Do it. You have to watch The Shining and Dr. Sleep back to back. Holy crap!
I've heard literally from especially because I've now kind of started watching horror a little bit more. Every single person who I've said oh yeah, I'm actually kind of getting more into it and enjoying kind of seeing the art of what makes something scary and things like that. They're like, watch The Shining. The Shining. Just for how good of a film it is. Even though I know it's famous that Stephen King doesn't like the film.
Kubrick changed a lot versus his perception of the film versus the way the book played out.
Yes.
And some of it worked, and some of it didn't, to King. Based on just what he was going through and how he wrote it. But what's wonderful about Dr. Sleep and why it's such a great sequel is Mike Flanagan, who directed Haunting on Hill House and a couple other films. He did Gerald's Game, which was, in the eyes of Stephen King fans, the unmakeable as far as a film, and he made it for Netflix, and apparently it was decent. I haven't seen it, but I hear that fans were happy enough that he had toyed with the idea of Dr. Sleep and wrote the script and turned it in and got Stephen King's blessing. Anyways, he had the task of not only appeasing Stephen King, the book, but also being able to tie it to Kubrick's film. So he said that was his goal, to make both parties happy. Turned in the final product of both Stephen King and the Kubrick stake. Both were like, yep. And that alone, when I heard that
they
had both approved,
yep.
I was like, I'm in. My ticket's purchased. I don't even care. And I work at a theater, and I get free movies here and there. But ticket purchase. There you go. And I saw it. I had just watched The Shining a week before, and then watched it, and I was blown away. Now, I don't read books because of my attention span. I can't pay attention enough. Mm-hmm. I have ADHD. So movies are my books. Mm-hmm. That's why I love movies as much as I do, because they can pull me in, and a lot of the times the movies based on books, and they don't always work out, and they're not always as good. But I enjoy the stories nonetheless. Mm-hmm. So I read the cliff notes on Dr. Sleep enough to kind of see where the movie was going to go and what changes happened. Changes did occur, and it was such a good sequel. I loved it very much. The movie is only about 2.5 hours. If you get the Blu-ray, it's on the 4K too, but digitally, there's a 3-hour extended cut.
I was going to say, you say only 2.5 hours. I'm like, that's longer than the average film.
3-hour extended cut. I want a double feature.
Isn't The Shining like
it's
2.5 to 3
hours? It's like 2 hours and 45 minutes. I was going to say, I thought
that the original Shining from the 80s was pretty long.
Yeah, it's one of those long movies that, but it pulls you in so much because you're watching the story of cabin fever with Jack Torrance and him, who's trying to recover from alcoholism, and I've talked about The Shining a couple episodes ago with Tracy. That The Shining is 2.5 hours. Mm-hmm. So if you're watching Dr. Sleep, the extended cut, and The Shining, you're looking at 5.5 hours.
That's a lot.
That's not bad for 2 movies. It's not Lord of the Rings.
For a double, yeah.
It's not Lord of the Rings.
That's true.
And we've talked about that. No, I very much recommend both of those. And now that Dr. Sleep is out on home video, I highly recommend watching them both back to back. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I think you'll need at least take 10 minutes, though, because you're going to have to take it in after The Shining. Because, holy crap, that movie is probably one of the best horror films of all time. I love it very much. If Alien wasn't my top, I would probably say The Shining was. And my list moves around a lot, but I would have to say, sitting down seriously thinking, if Alien wasn't my top horror film, The Shining would be.
Well, I was going to say an Alien danced back and forth on my list between the horror and the sci-fi.
Sci-fi, yeah, but I have so many sci-fi loves that I gave Alien the horror crown, but Shining is definitely my number 2.
Yeah.
So highly recommend that. We're getting kind of late, so we're going to go quickly on these. Favorite decade of film is the late 80s to the late 90s. So you're kind of capping it at the end of the 80s to the end of the 90s.
And that's where, from that, you might be able to gather what I'm kind of thinking, which is you're seeing the rise of CGI getting utilized. And we already talked last episode a bunch about how fantastic Jurassic Park to me was the first pinnacle of getting that right and doing that. But then it moved on to things like The Matrix, which was super impressive. And Episode 1, which were both Phantom Menace, were both same year. Matrix won visual effects, though, over Star Wars, I think.
I don't remember, because I wasn't paying attention to the Academy Awards at age 14, but
I wasn't either. It's just something that I think I remember hearing.
I'll have to look it up. But it's one of those, that era of film is definitely, if that's your reasoning behind it.
I was going to say, that's kind of my reasoning / just... Also, just from my childhood, I was a 90s child, so I grew up watching most of the movies in the 90s. But then you also had the ones in the 80s that my parents remember, things like Ghostbusters and Back to the Future, and of course the episodes 5 and 6 of Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
Which they, of course, made sure to show me. So that was kind of my first introduction to movies, and the movies upon which I've kind of based and judged my tastes, and
it's such a good. I mean, even if you're coming out of the 80s into the 90s alone were a great decade of film. But the 80s had some great classics, and then I love a lot of the movies in the earlier to mid 80s personally. But like you're saying, the CGI was starting to get its movement. Back to your Matrix comment, it actually won 4 Oscars.
I thought that it got a couple.
Best film editing, best sound effect editing, and best visual effects. So they should just lump that all into best effects.
Yeah, basically.
No, but that's 4 Oscars, man. I didn't see The Matrix until junior year of high school. I saw it on DVD, and it changed me. That was one of those movies that it changed a lot for cinema. But I saw it, and it was one of, because I was younger, and my parents were big on me not watching R-rated features or things like that until I was of age. They were big on being protective, and some parents are like that. So I didn't get to see it until later, and I saw it around the same time. I was Lord of the Rings is happening for me, so The Matrix and Lord of the Rings were like starting to mold me and change me into this film loving weird kid that wanted to write stupid stories, and I could go on about it, but it's so whenever I get to do my list down the road, it's in my top 5. I love that one. You've got 2 movies under the
I would say just talk about
just
the
one
second. Yeah,
okay.
I'll let enough people who probably love Mean Girls. It doesn't deserve the spot.
Okay.
It's just all that I could think of.
Yeah, well, we won't get into that either, but under the movies that you felt were bad or were disappointed in, you put Michael Cera and Jack Black's Year One. I haven't even seen this movie, and I was gonna say I probably don't need to.
Well, I mean, if just saying Michael Cera, Jack Black, Year One, as in like beginning of the world, cavemen / parodying biblical times. I actually saw this movie in theaters, I think that's the only time I've seen it. It makes me sound like a heartless person, but I'm not huge into comedy, or like, it's not that I hate laughing or that I don't find anything funny, but I again prefer a movie that has a story, that has compelling characters and everything, and if it happens to be funny, awesome. I love laughing and stuff like that, but if it's comedy for comedy's sake, and the whole point is that it's so bizarre, or it's so dumb, or it's so, I don't know, that it's funny, I don't like it, and this kind of checks all of those.
Well, I'm a pretty big Will Ferrell fan. Don't watch Holmes and Watson. I watched it just because it was on HBO, and I was like, it's on, I have nothing to do. My wife wanted to see it just to say we saw it.
Well, whenever I have this conversation, everyone's like, well, you need to at least, another Will Ferrell film, they're like, you need to see Step Brothers. And
that movie is hilarious.
Well, and that's where people have said that it's hilarious, and I'm like, I really don't think I will find it funny, because most films, I shouldn't just sell myself out like this, but I also almost put Bridesmaids on here, because that's another film that, like, everyone thought was the funniest thing ever, and I saw the whole thing. I didn't really find it funny.
I love the one-liners of Step Brothers and Anchorman. See, I love my wife. Her guilty pleasure film would probably be Blades of Glory. And it's John Heder from Napoleon Dynamite and Will Ferrell. And it's just so silly for no reason, but at the same time, it's actually really good. And she loves that movie. Anytime I'm like, we should watch something. What do you want to watch? And she'll jokingly say Blades of Glory. And I look at her like, again? like I'm taking her serious. But I know I actually don't know if she's serious. And sometimes she is.
Yeah,
but Will Ferrell has done some silly things. I think I appreciate him much because I grew up watching Saturday Night Live as much as I did.
No, and I do appreciate, especially SNL, like I do appreciate a bunch of the things that Will Ferrell has done. And again, it's not that I hate all comedy. It's just typically comedy for comedy's sake and stuff is just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone. Your last one on your list is
I actually am going off script for, because I just now thought of something better.
Which is great.
Same vein of this.
So
Guilty Pleasures.
Yeah.
I really like Devil Wears Prada.
Okay.
As a film. And that also is kind of going against a lot of this, because that's one that I do find very funny. And I think that it's partially that it's tied, again, I'm not a fashion person, but it's tied to the design industry, and some of the caricatures. And I don't know, my wife is always like, you don't like chick flicks, and that's, to be honest, I don't like that much, and that can technically be considered one, but it's just an enjoyable film, and Meryl Streep is fantastic.
Meryl Streep's great, and Anne Hathaway was in it too.
Anne Hathaway and Emily Blunt.
Emily Blunt, yep. I remember it being a good film. I've seen it once, and I have nothing against it at all. I am laughing that you were quickly like, no, not that one.
The other one was Legally Blonde,
yeah,
which is another one that, and that was one where my wife was like, we should watch this, and I was like, fine, whatever. And then I actually got really sucked in and was like, this is actually really funny and clever, and both of them to me they're kind of smart in some ways, like with how they write them. Don't ask me to back that up, but it's late at night.
You've probably seen him as more than I have, but no, I think I've seen. Have I seen Legally Blonde fully? I can't remember, honestly. They're not my types of movies, and
honestly, they're not really my type of movies. But I enjoy them too immensely.
I mean, I can also tell you that My Big Fat Greek Wedding is not my type of movie.
That's another one that I actually really like too. I was going
to say, I liked that one. That was one my parents would watch off and on, and the whole running joke about the Windex fixing everything. Yeah, hysterical.
That was just on it over Christmas. I was back in Michigan at my wife's parents' house, and that was on the TV, and it made me smile.
Oh, yeah, I see that I get it. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. There are movies out there that's not necessarily my cup of tea, but I like them. And that, growing up, I don't own it, but if it was on TV, I'd be like, this one. And
that one does have a lot of good one-liners, My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
It does. I didn't see the second one, which
Consider
is okay.
all three of these on my guilty pleasure movies. I don't know which one. Originally, I wrote down Legally Blonde, but these also weren't originally on my...
They weren't on your list.
On my list. These questions weren't on the list, so it was literally like 5 minutes before we started recording. He was like, oh, by the way, come up with these.
New questions.
New questions. And I slaved over this list for weeks, and I don't like picking favorites.
Whereas Juan Carlos in the last couple of episodes had it back to being 20 minutes with the new questions.
Well, I'm not surprised. Again, with how much we talked about these things at Movie Ride, I'm not surprised that some people are literally just like, I have my list.
Yeah.
I've thought about this so long and hard all those years that...
When I developed the questionnaire, I call it, because it's not really a script. It's just kind of something to keep us on track, even though we don't stay on track at all. Mm-hmm. I hadn't even finished mine, and I have one printed, but I'm already finding myself like the directors. No, that's not right. Oh God, no, but this, and I'm like, and I realized the frustration. That's
exactly what I did.
Another reason I'm enjoying, I guess, doing my own list is I understand what you're going through because I'm doing it for myself as well, just so I can have my list to say I know what mine are. I don't. There's so many. There are so many because I've just seen.
Well, I was going to say, just from hearing past episodes and stuff, and from knowing you, I know that at least Hans Zimmer will be somewhere on your list. Will probably be on your composer. There are certain things where I'm like, I can guarantee that certain ones will be somewhere in there.
The Rocketeer, I can tell you my top 5 verbatim is The Rocketeer, Tron, The Matrix, Blade Runner, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That is my top 5.
They're all very solid, yeah.
And those are, those will always stay. Blade Runner and Matrix flip-flop from 3 and 4 sometimes, but generally that's the list. And Tron, of course, is the original Tron. I love Legacy, but Tron is definitely my number 2.
Was The Matrix on my list?
Your Matrix was on your sci-fi list.
Okay, I was like, I thought that it was. I couldn't remember if it got kicked or not, but yes.
Yeah, but it's and it's not like I'm scripting you guys that you have to stick to this. I mean, this is kind of just, I just love talking about what you guys are enjoying and movies I haven't seen, so I can kick myself in the face for not watching them and hopefully sit down. I'm keeping everyone's list, and I'm making this huge watch list on because I have the Letterboxd app. I'm not sure if you have that.
No, I don't.
I'll tell you about it after the show. And if you don't have it, highly recommend it. Letterboxd with BOXD, not BOXED. Letterboxd. It's an app that you can keep your movies you watch, movies you want to watch, rate them, talk about them. I'm not plugging them. I love the app because I can keep track of everything I've seen and want to. Great app. But I'm keeping all of the movies I haven't seen, and I'm slowly putting on my watch list for Letterboxd so I can I use that. I'm like, I sit down, what do I want to watch today? I'll go back through my Letterboxd app, and it does it in order, not by alphabet of the title of the movie. So like I can know recently I added this chunk of movies and that chunk, and so I can know that I've recently added these to watch. It's nice, and you can edit the order, but that's how I keep it, so I can keep track of what I've recently added from talking to the guests. So, Jesse, thank you for being on, and we did go a little bit more than we.
It's because we talked about Phantom Menace for like 45 minutes. It's okay, it happens.
So on the next episode, when we talk about Attack of the Clones, no, I'm just kidding.
I can tell you right now, I don't like sand.
It gets everywhere. Thanks for listening to us, Jesse. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much
it's been
for
a
having me
pleasure talking shop.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed it. Thank you again for listening to us. If you are listening to us on YouTube, you can also find us on Spotify, Anchor. Thank you for listening, and cheers.
Cheers.
The Great Movie Radio Show is recorded in Orlando, Florida. You can visit our website at www.thegmrshow.com. Art direction and logo design provided by Mr. Bayless. Voiceover and intro work provided by Dave Fesky and Joe Erickson. You can find our podcast on multiple platforms such as Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and many more. Music provided by the YouTube Audio Library. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Just search The Great Movie Radio Show or The GMR Show. This has been The Great Movie Radio Show. We hope you enjoy your day, and we'll see you at the movies, the stuff dreams are made of. Goodbye, everyone.
You have been listening to a GMR radio production.